France 24. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're getting the region's eye on what's going on in Egypt and on the future of political Islam with Amr Darragh, senior member of the Muslim Brotherhood, who joins us again from Cairo. With us here in the studio, Mira Daridan, who is the Egyptian author of An Islam of the Heart. Joining us from Istanbul, Mahir Zainalov, journalist for Turkish daily Today's Zaman. Thank you for being with us. We had issues in part one with technical things, but they seem to be resolved. Thanks for being with us. And joining us from Tel Aviv, again, is Israeli-Iranian political scientist Mahir Javandanfar of the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya. Just before the break, we were talking about Saudi Arabia and how it's been a good run for them. The leader of the Syrian opposition is Saudi-backed. In Egypt, they were the first to congratulate the military after the ouster of Mohamed Morsi. It's also good news for them what's happening in Egypt when it comes to Gaza. That is because there is the border that is now closed between Egypt and Gaza, Saudi Arabia, which is closer to the Fatah movement, which is over in the West Bank. Gaza residents, well, on the eve of Ramadan, they're worried.
Events in Egypt had a negative impact on us. Goods stopped coming from the country. We pray to God the situation in Egypt will be better for the Egyptians, since it will also improve our economic situation. Plus, the month of Ramadan is about to start.
Mahir Zainalov, do you get the sense that since the ouster of Mohamed Morsi, the balance of power in the region has somehow shifted?
Right, that's exactly true. But the problem is that we don't know to which side it is and which group will strike back. So we have the balances in Northern Africa, but also in Syria, which is a hot thing. It's very unfortunate that the regional countries, like the Gulf countries, except Qatar and Turkey, are politically rivaling in these countries. So Turkey also pledged $2 billion to Egypt, along with Qatar, which pledged $8 billion. And only a couple of days after the military coup d'etat in Egypt, same two Gulf countries are pledging in total $8 billion. So it's very unfortunate that it's not really, the aid is not really going there to help revive the economy of Egypt, but to rival political factions there. But when we look at the region, the Muslim Brotherhood was a patron of Hamas in Gaza, and also the Muslim Brotherhood. Another option was in Syria, which was backed by Qatar and Turkey. So, but very unfortunate that no one knows that to which direction that things are going, and it could just implode in a very tragic ways.
Mira Daridan.
Well, I'd like to comment on what was said from our guest from Israel. I cannot listen to somebody saying that this is a denegation of democracy, point blank, and it is dangerous for the region, when you cannot also want stability and not combat extremism. I mean, in the Sinai, there are arms, there were militia people training, camps, etc., etc. Until when are we going to play the correctness vis-à-vis everybody and not safeguard Egypt as a country? Now, what Israel was risking with escalation is that out of all arguments possible, what is the one argument that would unite everybody to the Muslim Brotherhood? It is Israel. Everybody would go against Israel. So if you really want safety in the region, don't put all your eggs in one basket that is a potentially harmful one to your country.
Mahir Javandanfar?
I understand the point regarding combating extremism, but I'd like to also say that one of the ways that to combat terrorism, you need to fight terror, Israel's been doing it against the Hamas leadership before. We saw what happened to Sheikh Yassin and Rantisi. But at the same time, you also, to combat terrorism, you need to give voice to those who end up supporting them. If by marginalizing the poor and the religious, we only support extremism, we give them what they want. I don't like the Muslim Brotherhood any more than you do, but toppling them by power and then putting the leader on the house arrest for what? Closing down their TV station, that only supports the extremists, which is exactly what we don't want. That will only give voice and credibility to a party which was proving itself as a failure to Egyptians and would have most probably lost at the next elections.
I'm laughing
so I think
here.
in terms of fighting the extremists...
I'm laughing here. Are you combating extremism by just talking to them? No. You're combating them with bombs. You're combating them with putting them into jails, etc., etc. So why do you justify that for Israel to protect itself, and you do not justify that for Egypt to protect its people?
Palestinian politicians being placed. I'm not justifying Palestinian. I actually think it was a mistake not to allow Hamas. Well, after 2005, as much as I can't stand Hamas, and that's an understatement, I think it was a mistake not to allow them to take over the government institutions after they won fair and square in the Palestinian elections. And I blame whoever blocked them from happening. But I'm sorry, look at what's happening in Egypt today. Look at the massive gulf that has been created in Egypt. It would have been as much a mistake not to allow Hamas to take over the governments after they won the elections, or to topple them, as it is now in Egypt to topple Muslim Brotherhood. This is not the way to fight extremism.
We are not saying
by using guns against, by removing them through coup d'etat, we're only giving them what we want. But in this region, what we want is for everybody to have a voice, and for those who are democratically elected, no matter if they are secular or religious, to rule according to the time they're given by the democratic offices of the country, and to allow them to show the people that they're a failure, and certainly not the army.
All right, let me bring Amr Darag into this. Amr, what are your thoughts listening to this conversation?
Related to this, let me comment on a couple of points that your guest made during the first part of the conversation. And this is related to what you were asking. When she referred to the 30 million of people that went out in the streets asking for Morsi to go. Anyway, I'm not disputing the figures. I don't know how she counted them. I can claim that we are 40 million people, and the argument can go on forever. The point is that all the voices against. Let me finish, please. The point that people were demonstrating against President Morsi, that's fine. That is very compatible with the democratic norms. That is quite respectable. I respect everybody who went out in the streets protesting against Morsi. The same way I respect people who are supporting Morsi. But right now we are in front of something that is different. We are in front of one of the political powers made use of the military to get the military power to conduct a military coup in order to oust a democratically elected president. And ironically, where everybody is accusing the Islamists to be non-democratic and the liberals to be democratic, it seems to be the other way around. I mean, the Islamists have been all the way after the Egyptian revolution with democracy. We've gone through several democratic processes, and we are very willing, if in elections we lose elections, to give power to whoever wins the election. This is becoming part of our political faith right now. And when she unfortunately refers to people who look like Muslim Brotherhood shooting at demonstrators, I don't know how Muslim Brotherhood people look like. I mean, how do I look like? I mean, did people look like me?
No, come on, sir. Come on.
I mean, this is something. I mean, these arguments.
I'm going to interrupt. I'm sorry. I'm going to interrupt both of you on this.
But let me finish. I mean, if
very briefly, because this is the debate we had last night.
Well, I wasn't there last night. If we are going to run a respectable debate based on political arguments, based on logic, that's fine. But to put in arguments like this is really not acceptable.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to have a very polite debate. I'm very calm, and I'm just asking one question to you, Efendim. Were you for or against the 25th of January revolution?
I was part of the 25th of January revolution.
Good. So that was an elected president as well. But you
No, 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 no,
justify
no.
a
That was
revolution
not
against
You know,
Mr.
but
Just
you
hold
and
on a
I-
moment. You
but you and
justify
I know that
one
was not an
revolution
elected president.
against Mr. Mubarak, and you discredit another as popular revolution, even more popular. There were more people in the
I'm not
streets.
discrediting anybody. What I'm saying is that if there are masses in the streets against Morsi, that's fine. But there are masses, other masses that we see on TV that are pro-democracy. And again, I am saying that it's not the issue of Morsi or the Muslim Brotherhood any longer. It is the issue of the democratic path.
All right, let's bring it back to the discussion that we were talking about, which is regional winners and losers. Mohamed Morsi's tenure started so forcefully. He brokered a truce for Gaza. He stood up to the Iranians at a non-aligned summit in Tehran over Syria. That was last August. But when he broke for good with Syria last month, he stood silent at a rally while a Sunni cleric railed against Shiites. And just a few days later, a lynch mob killed 4 Shiites outside of Cairo. The shock of the incident helped to topple Morsi. Meyer Javandanfar, what does this do for Iran's standing? What's going on?
I think there are losses and gains for Iran. For example, in terms of losses, of course, which we see that the Saudis have won by removing Morsi in Egypt. And I think, this is also a blow against the Turks, which has become a competitor to Iran. But I think on balance, there are definitely more gains for Iran. We see somebody who had a lot of credibility because he was not only democratically elected, but he was an Islamist leader taking on Iran regarding Syria. Iran found it very difficult to confront Morsi's credibility. We saw when he went to Iran, when the Iranians were so worried about him lambasting the Syrian regime that every time he said the word Syria, his Persian translators replaced it with the word Bahrain because they were so concerned. They didn't do that to any other leader. And of course, this is bad news for Iran. This is good news for Iran because now the Iranian regime can say, the Iranian regime, which is of course, itself, the supreme leader is an unelected religious figure, can say, look, the Westerners, when it comes to democracy, they only respect it when secular parties are in charge and not when Islamists are in charge. So I think this also is a blow against those of us in the Middle East who want democracy, a plural democracy. And it's for those who don't want it, which is, of course, the Iranian supreme leader and those around him. So I think on balance, when we look at the general picture, this is good news for Iran, despite some disadvantages.
Now, the French president in Tunisia last week on a state visit was firmly keeping an eye on Egypt. It was on the back of his mind when he gave an address before the Tunisian parliament, and he said, of course, Islam has a place in politics.
France knows that Islam and democracy are compatible. France also knows that Tunisia draws its identity from multiple sources, and that political, economic, and social progress demand the participation of everyone in a democracy, and the respect of freedom and equal rights.
Meyer Zeynalov, from Turkey, where we've seen the stiffest challenge to the Islamist-leaning AK party since Recep Tayyip Erdogan came to power a decade ago over the past few weeks. What's the reaction to the way things have proceeded in Tunisia and Egypt?
Well, Turks are deeply upset and very concerned on the latest developments in North Africa, particularly in Egypt. If there's one country in the world that's very experienced with military coups, and this is Turkey, because we have survived a full-scale military coup d'etat and one what we call a postmodern coup d'etat that forced the civilian government to resign. So the Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan went ballistic against those who supported the coup d'etat in Egypt, and also those the interim government and also the army which stepped in to remove Morsi and suspend constitution. Almost many ministers, including the foreign minister, condemned the coup d'etat, and also they condemned the anti-democratic policies that the interim government and the army pursued, and also what they call the massacre when on Friday the army shot on the protesters who were praying, were performing the morning prayer. So Turks have also been very active on social media with hashtags condemning the coup, and also displaying solidarity and expressing sympathy to the ousted President Mohamed Morsi. So again, the Turks, Turkey and Tunisia are the two countries that condemned the coup. The only two countries that condemn the coup, and very concerned. People here are very concerned of both opposition, both the government, and we'll get to see, how anti-democratic tendencies the new government will have.
Mira Dardan, your reaction to the reaction in Turkey?
One wouldn't be surprised to the reaction of exactly Turkey and Tunisia with Islamist governments. I'm not surprised. We like the Tunisian people. We like the Turkish people. We're not go against what they're saying, or some of them are saying. It is acceptable. They're living under what we lived into for a year. So we know the pressures. We know that the people want to believe in something. We are all religious. We are all practicing religious people in this part of the world, be it Muslim, Jew, or Christian. We are religious. So I don't blame them for saying what they say. I don't blame François Hollande for going to Tunisia and having to say...
Do you agree with what the French president said? You don't think that Islam has a place in politics?
I think Islam has a place in politics so long as it is a sort of a mixture of secularism and Islam together. We are all the same. We should be acting the same. As soon as violence comes in,
but that's not what he was saying.
As soon as you want to impose your views and not listen to others, the way the Constitution...
He was praising their Tunisians for
having
political Islam and also respecting diversity.
I don't blame him for saying that. What I blame him for is what he said in front of Mr. Marzouki in a television interview. L'échec de l'Égypte. It is not an échec. And he corrected it, a failure. He corrected it later in front of the parliament. It is not a failure. It is the progression of one revolution into a second revolution. What I'm definitely against is a political party based on religion that imposes its view on whole population, 10% of whom is even not Muslim.
All right, we have a comment on Facebook from Rashad saying, political Islam is not dead. Politics is all about rallying people behind your cause, and if religion happens to be effective at doing that in certain areas, then it will be used by the politicians. Which brings us to our Media Buzz segment, and for that, we can say hello to James Creedon. How are you, sir?
Evening, Francois. You were just talking about the, I suppose, politicization of this. Christian Estrosi, the UMP party mayor of Nice, created a little bit of a stir.
Conservative, I believe.
Yes, and progressively more conservative when the elections are approaching. And he created a bit of a stir by saying Islam and democracy are absolutely not compatible. It's not a new idea, but perhaps the timing of it was with elections in mind. That's what some people are saying.
And the far-right National Front has a big following in that part of France.
Absolutely. So just to show you a couple of reactions on social media to this, Patrick Almond, he is a politician also from the south of France for the Socialist Party, so the governing Socialist Party. Islam and democracy, he says, are incompatible. The heads of state of French-speaking Muslim countries are meeting in Nice on the 5th of September. What an ambiance, because Estrosi is the mayor of Nice. Elsewhere, Samuel Laurent, he is a political journalist, and he says local elections are approaching. Estrosi is taking a swing to the right with a very controlled and premeditated outburst. So he's saying that what he said was perhaps excessive, but it was thought through in advance. And just one more reaction on that, an MEP from Marseille, Karim Zeribi. Estrosi is pathetic, ready to do anything to get far-right votes, target the Roma, Islam is incompatible with the Republic, and that was a minister. So clearly it's a controversial statement every time it is made. But it is an idea that is being expounded in the media, this notion based on what has happened in Egypt that Islam and democracy are not compatible. This is an article by Reuters, in Reuters Newswire, where they asked the opinion of various thinkers such as Hussein Haqqani, a former Pakistani ambassador. He says Islamism by definition is not inclusive, but now it needs to be inclusive. Other people who were questioned are Olivier Roy, who wrote a book.
Sociologist.
Exactly, wrote a book called The Failure of Political Islam, L'échec de l'Islam politique. Again, his idea is that a modern state is not compatible with Islam, and that indeed, for example, the people who were demonstrating, women who were demonstrating in Egypt were demonstrating against incompetence and nepotism, not even Sharia, that essentially Islamism and democracy can't work. But it's not the only point of view out there. This is an interesting piece in the Hurriyet Daily News in Turkey by Mustafa Aykal. He says, yes, Islamists are undeniably authoritarian in their tendencies, but the secularists who oppose them are too. He takes the example in Egypt of Mubarak, who was a secularist, just as authoritarian as Morsi in some senses, and Erdogan in Turkey, who is Islamist, but his secularist predecessors were also fans of nepotism, imposing way of life, silencing opponents. So it's perhaps not Islam, but a style of doing politics that underpins it.
All right, James Creedon, many thanks for that. And the question, I guess, I'll put it to Amr Darag. For years, when the Muslim Brotherhood was in the opposition, there was the slogan that was often used, which was Islam is the solution. Is that a slogan that, I guess you could say, boxed your movement in? Because Islam obviously can't be the solution to everything when it comes to politics.
Well, this may be your point of view, somebody else's point of view, but we do believe that Islam is our reference. It includes solutions to all of our problems if we take it as reference. But this does not mean that we find the details and the solutions of each and particularly detailed problem in the Quran, for example, or in Islam. But what we mean is always that the methodology, the reference that is given by Islam provides us with the way in order to be able to lead our path and solve our problems. As a matter of fact, what is happening right now in Egypt proves, for the last year and now, proves that Islamists are probably, at least in Egypt, are probably better Democrats than liberals, because during the time that an Islamist president was in power, not a TV channel was closed, no political detainees were taken, everybody was free to express his opinions, massive demonstrations, nobody faced that or forced that or met that with force or gunfire. Look at what's happening right now. The moment the regime changed according to a military coup, people are, the same night, the chairman of our party, who used to be the speaker of the parliament, was put in jail with many other, maybe more than 600 people, members of our party, are in jail right now without charges. You find TV stations closed, and the liberal forces are hand in hand with the military trying to form a government. So who is more democratic? How can you apply the rules of democracy to this situation? I don't think that the world is really applying the same standards everywhere.
We have a comment on this point on Twitter. You're having the wrong debate, we're told. Islam is democratic. Political exploitation isn't. Myra?
Well, that was what I wanted to cut the conversation here and say. Islam and Islamism are two separate things. And if Mr. Darag is talking to us constantly about the power and the chair of power, I am defending Islam, and I am not a Muslim Brotherhood. But when Mr. Estrosi says that Islam and democracy are incompatible, Mr. Estrosi is wrong, and not only is he insulting all the Muslims in France, but all over, and he is saying that the day before the Ramadan. So here, I, the secular, wake up and say, this is incompatible with democracy. What he is saying, Mr. Estrosi, is incompatible and unacceptable. Mr. Darag defends the Muslim Brotherhood. I defend Islam, and I'm a Muslim, and I don't accept that.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Fortunately, if we'd had more time, we would have asked how religious parties fare across the border in Israel, but the clock is running brutally short. I want to thank our guests. I want to thank Mira Daradan for being with us, Amr Darag for being with us from Cairo, also Mayer Zainalov in Istanbul, and Mayer Javandanfar for being with us from Tel Aviv. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Much more to come at the top of the hour.